October 12th, 1999. It was an historic day. Did you celebrate? No, probably no one did. It's when the world's population reached 6 billion. Now, the scary thing is that in 1988, the world's population reached 5 billion. So it took the whole of the Earth's history to get to 5 billion, and then just 12 years to get to 6. Yeah, we're going up. All of us. By 2050, the world's population is going to be 9 billion. 9 billion. I mean, is population growth ever going to end? Can we control it? Or is it just going to be a matter of too many people without enough room? Hey, people, this is not going to work. I can't breathe. In the last 100 years, we've found ways to prevent and cure diseases. We've increased food production. More and more of us are living longer and healthier lives. In the last century in the United States, the life expectancy of an average person has doubled. So the good news, fewer and fewer of us are dying. The bad news, fewer and fewer of us are dying. See, it's the same news. There are about 150 more people in the world than there were a minute ago when this show started. The world's population has doubled twice in the last 100 years. But we here in the United States hardly notice this population explosion. Is there an upper limit to the number of people that we can have in the world? And have we gone past that limit? But for us here in the developed world, does that even matter?
The Eyes of Nye. The Eyes of Nye.
When populations grow unimpeded, they get big fast. In mathematics, we call this an exponential curve. When it's curved just a little bit, as you move this way, it curves a little bit more. But as it gets more curved, it curves more and more in a hurry. These horns have exponential curves. Just a little sound energy at this end makes a lot of noise at that end. Exponential curves are an old idea. An old idea. An old idea! As the story goes, in ancient Persia, a courtier presented the king with an exquisite chess set. The king was very pleased. For payment, the courtier asked for nothing more than grains of rice. The king thought the courtier was very foolish to be paid in this fashion. He wanted a single grain for the first square of the chessboard, 2 grains for the second, 4 for the third, 8 for the fourth, and so on, doubling each time. At the end of the first row, the king would need 128 grains of rice. At the 12th square, the king would need more than a pound of rice. To cover the entire debt, all 64 squares, the king would need more than the entire world's production of rice. So the courtier wasn't so foolish after all. You see where this is going, doubling each time. In 1965, when I attended the World's Fair, the world's population had just reached 3 billion people. Well, it's more than doubled in my lifetime. Now, I don't know where we are on the evolutionary chessboard of life, but how many more billions do you think the Earth can take?
Did you know that in 1800, the world population was just 1 billion people? But by 1965, it could reach 3 billion.
But, Mr. Sanders, 1965 passed a long time ago.
Yes, Mr. Sanders. It's not the 1950s. It's the 21st century now, and the world population is over 6 billion.
If that is true, children, then why are we dressed like this?
Because you made us, Mr. Sanders.
My mother says it's because you're sick, Mr. Sanders.
Every day, my parents pray for more money so they can send me to a school with better teachers, Mr. Sanders.
You should get help, Mr. Sanders.
The fastest growing countries in the world are the developing nations. The population explosion is the most pronounced in Africa and Asia. In Nigeria, for example, the average number of children born per woman is 6.2. But remember, population growth is a global issue. As a species, we all share just one planet. That's why population growth is at the top of the list of concerns at the United Nations. What did you do at the United Nations in 1994?
Well, in 1994, I was the Secretary General of the International Conference on Population and Development. We did some surveys around the world, and we found that in every region, women wanted to have fewer children than they actually had. Even in Africa, where the family size was about 8, but the desired family size was about 4. And when you ask people why then did they have the excess number, there were very interesting responses. And the first was, well, we don't make those decisions. That decision is made by the husband, by the family, or what is expected of us by the society. And so we came to the conclusion that somehow if we could empower women, give them the information, change the social environment in which decisions of these kinds were made, then in fact the national demographic objectives and the global demographic objectives would in fact coincide with individual needs and desires. One of the common misconceptions about reproductive health programs, particularly for adolescents, is that if you provide information, young people will become sexually active. And that if you provide them access to services like, contraceptives, condoms, etc., that they will be promiscuous, which is totally the opposite of what we have found. You find that sexual activity is, in fact, starts later, that the number of abortions or pregnancies in these countries comes down very dramatically.
1994, in human history terms, isn't very long ago.
No.
This is the first time people connected population with development.
Development, yes. I started to formulate this idea that, how women's health was so connected with all the social and cultural, the taboos, the environment, the controls that were exercised on them. Think about the fact that in many Asian societies, Africa, etc., when you have 2 children, who's educated? It's a boy. And why? Because they think that the girl, her economic security will come from being married to somebody. So she goes to somebody else's house. So why should we educate her? Even in the back of their minds is why should we keep her healthy? Because, infant mortality for girls becomes higher in many countries. My objective is to improve the lives of individual women and men and their children, and particularly of women who somehow took their lives for granted. It's only when women start to realize that they can change that they start to make the change. Till they realize that in their mind, that they can actually make the change, you have to work hard to do this.
So since you've been watching this program, there are about 1,000 more people in the world. That's because at any given time, 5 women are giving birth. And I know what you're saying. We got to find those 5 women and stop them right now. That's kind of a gag there. But biologically speaking, we have to have reproduction. That's part of the process. But a woman can have up to 15 kids comfortably. Maybe not that comfortably. But women are fertile for up to 30 years.
Hey, caveman.
Oh, me?
Yeah. Hey, what do you think about the population problem?
It's terrible. It's doubled in the 5 years I've lived here.
It's doubled?
Yeah. It was just me and the wife, and now there are 2 kids as well. It is really a strain on the resources, let me tell you.
You know that sex causes children, right?
Honey, did you know that sex causes children?
I just thought it caused a rash.
Well, no. Apparently it's where the kids came from.
That's enough of that, then.
When the United States was a developing country 200 years ago, the average family had 7 kids. Then came the industrial age and the expression, you can't keep them down on the farm. The 20th century saw the birth of something new in America, family planning. As we moved into modern times, smaller families made sense. But when it comes to less developed countries with age-old cultures, how do you change attitudes about responsible family planning? As more and more babies are born in the general hospital, that's where you'll find all my children as the world turns, the young and the restless. Wait, maybe we're onto something.
我知道没这一天了，你到底还是嫁过来了啊？铺床，老子要睡觉。你听见没有？
郑二顺，你还知不知道要脸？
So what do? You produce television?
We don't actually produce them. What we do is, I think the best expression would be to midwife them into existence. We are attendant, if you will, upon their birth. We go in at the request either of the UN or of the government or some NGO that says, this is an area, we need help here, can you help us? And then we do an enormous amount of formative research. What are the issues? What are the realities in that country that need addressing? The smart people learn it by trial and error. The smarter people watch it by other people doing trial and error. And what works out well, they'll say, okay, that's pretty good, I think I'll do that. Now, when we set up models in our soap operas, there are people who are doing something which has good results, and then down the line, people doing something which has bad results. The name of the program was Humrahi, and it played for a year on the Indian network in prime time, 9 o'clock at night, once a week. But in this series, Anguri was a 14-year-old girl who had been dumped by her father into a marriage, an arranged marriage. And the young swain wanted to consummate the marriage, but Anguri had this dream of being a barrister, of being an attorney. A silly dream for a girl in her condition in India, but nevertheless, her spirit and her gallantry, and she was adorable. Just everybody in India fell in love with Anguri. Her mother-in-law, who is the agent by which some of these people are repressed in all of Asia, the mother-in-law becomes the agent of passing on these mores, burns her books, and in fact, she's forced into consummating the marriage, becomes pregnant, and 8 months into the story, when the whole country has fallen in love with Anguri, she dies in childbirth. Now, the letters, 75,000 or more letters poured into the station.
75,000.
And they translated some of them for me so I could read them. And they were so poignant because young women saying, that's me, I feel like committing suicide. But more importantly, probably fathers saying, I will never let this happen to my daughter, never. What you were able to do with this drama was to pierce those incrustations of hundreds of years of custom and get into the hearts and into the guts of the people watching. It is the magic of entertainment.
If you're going to do one thing, one message, what is that?
It really has to do with women. It has to do with the status of women, especially in Africa, especially in Asia. We know, and there are statistics that can confirm this, that for every year of education that a woman gets, the increase in population goes down. For every time a woman can hold a job, have control of finances, inherit money, be treated with respect, have a stake in society beyond being a breeder of children, that's the best insurance for bringing some of these things under control.
If you're one of the teeming millions living in cramped conditions in the overpopulated cities of Asia and South America, this message is for you. There's room in South Dakota.
Come on in. There's plenty of room. Like over there. There's lots of room over there. There's lots of room over in this part of the state in general.
How big is a billion? If you started counting right now and took 1 second to count each number, day and night, nonstop, you would reach 1 billion in 31 years. 251 days, 7 hours, 46 minutes, and 39 seconds. Now, China's population is 1.3 billion. Imagine trying to feed 1.3 billion people. It would take approximately 650 million pizzas. That's almost 2 billion cups of flour from 16 million bushels of wheat. We'd need 2/3 of a million acres of land to grow the wheat, and that's about the size of Rhode Island. That's just one meal. We aren't even talking about the pepperoni. To stave off starvation and a low standard of living, the Chinese government took drastic measures. In 1979, they introduced a one-child per family law. One couple, one child. A logical solution to a growing problem, or an unfair policy in the extreme?
You have to go to China, go to one of the cities, stand in the street, feel literally the pressure of the population. From government standpoint, this is something China has to do. If China wants to become a modernized country, the most important thing is to reduce your population.
Did it work?
Definitely. Because of the one-child policy, the estimation is that China has reduced a possible 200 to 300 million of population. Remember that number, 200 to 300 million of population. That means almost the entire United States population. But this achievement did not come without cost. In fact, China pays a huge price for the one-child policy. Yeah, meaning social, cultural, psychological impact on the society. And of course, the violation of the basic human rights, right? The government hired 200,000 staff to forcefully implement the policy at a cost of millions of dollars, right? Yeah. To do this. And many people are not appreciating that. And you see the tremendous resistance and the protest. You have to look at the main goal. Okay, the goal is to reduction of the population. And they did it. Okay, they did it. Gradually, people will understand the significance of this policy.
Between 200 and 300 million births have been prevented in China since 1979. That's 200 or 300 million people who didn't need food or clothing or to build houses or use electricity, wood, water, or oil. 200 or 300 million people who never threw anything away and who didn't have more children. But China's problems are far from over. The population is still on the rise. It is not expected to peak until mid-century at 1.6 billion. And as China opens up trade with the West, their citizens are starting to import our American lifestyle. So consumption is going up. The resources that might have been saved are being gobbled up faster and faster. In 2003, 11,000 cars rolled onto the streets of China every day. That means more gas, new freeways, fast food, and strip malls. Is this all starting to sound familiar? Do you know the most populous nation in the world?
The most populous nation?
India? I think India and China are tied.
Do you know the most populous nation in the world?
I think it's China.
Okay, then the second most?
Would be who? India?
Yeah. What's the third most?
Singapore?
Mexico.
Africa? Africa? Africa?
Okay, Africa's not a country. You got to narrow it down a little. It's the United States.
Is that right?
Yeah.
No, I had no idea.
No. Really?
Really?
Oh, my gosh.
Then why do you say that?
Well, I didn't think that we were that populous. I didn't think that we were cranking them out.
2.1. That's the ideal replacement rate. 2 parents have 2 kids. About 5% of the people don't have kids. And you end up with 0 population growth. Now, the United States has had a 2.1 replacement rate. Most of our growth has come from immigration. So we're a responsible country with a high standard of living. We have it figured out, right? Why don't more countries want to be like us?
Population and consumption are 2 sides of the same coin, so we feel that we need to work on both at once.
So the first thing we have to do, we have to reduce the number of people, right?
Well, we have to stabilize the world's population and then get to a sustainable number of people, which again deals with consumption. You could theoretically have a larger number of people consuming less, and they would have less impact on the planet. Or you could have fewer people, but if they consume a lot, they would still have a huge impact on the planet. We're talking about numbers of people and what they do, which I think is terribly important. The U.S. has only about 5% of the world's population, but we consume about 30% of the world's resources. So in that sense, we are the most overpopulated nation. In the 20th century, the U.S. population tripled, but U.S. consumption grew 17 times. This used to be open space. This used to be parkland. When I was a child, we could just come out and play out here. And now it's filled in. It's got a shopping center and a business and tons of houses and a big freeway running through it. I think that we have learned as Americans to think that everything grows forever, that we need growth in order to have a vibrant economy. And we've bought into growth as the idea of the American dream.
So you're saying that's having an effect on everybody all over the world?
It is. And the more we export our lifestyle, which we're very good at doing, unfortunately, the more people want to emulate us. The interesting thing that happens is that as women have more education and get jobs, they do have fewer children, but then they have more disposable income, so they become consumers. Now, not all consumption is bad, but unfortunately, American-style consumption is what the world has chosen to follow, and American-style consumption is very wasteful of the Earth's resources. Nothing grows forever. In fact, anything that grows beyond maturity is either cancer or obesity.
People in the United States are the worst consumers in the world. Well, okay, wait, maybe they're the best consumers in the world. It's hard to believe that the phrase less is more was coined by an American. The average person in the United States consumes 30 times as much as the average person in India. The average person in the United States uses 3 times as much water as the average person everywhere else in the world. In fact, if all 6 billion people living on the Earth right now were to consume the way we do in the United States, the world wouldn't be big enough. No, we'd need 2 more Earths. We'd need 3 planets to sustain everybody. How many people could the world support? Well, it depends. It's a sliding scale. Well, there's estimates that say the Earth could hold up to 48 billion people if we all were to live very meagerly, say everybody eating grains. Now, that would be taking the low road. Everyone would have a very low standard of living. But what if we want to take the high road, giving everybody as high a standard of living as possible? Well, there's estimates that given the resources, the land, the water, the oil, and the food available, the Earth can sustain only about 2 billion people. 2 billion. That's about as many as were alive back at the end of World War II. Now you're saying, well, how do we bring it back down? Well, if we could get the world's replacement rate to be only 1.7 babies per couple, then in a couple of centuries, we could get back down to a couple of billion people. Why bother? 2 centuries, 200 years? Who cares? None of us are ever going to see that. Well, it's a numbers game, my friends. And the sooner we start playing, the sooner we can win. That's the way I see it. And I'll see you next time on The Eyes of Nye.
Yeah, lots of room here. Kind of makes you a little crazy. Makes you want to scream. It's a lot of room.
Crazy behind the eyes.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. Check out eyesofnye.org for more cool science.